All right. Another eventful Thursday here as we gear up for another Pinto Town Hall. What's up, folks? How we doing today?
Doing well, doing well.
All right, is my microphone better now? Otherwise, I'll make a switch.
Yes, it's much better. I'm still hearing myself back in it. Maybe it's like voice isolation mode or something.
How about now?
I think it's better. Let's see. Let's see what happens.
Cool. All right.
Ben is like echoing a little bit, but yeah.
You hear some echoing?
I don't know if it's you or I think it's just Ben.
All
Is
right.
it when I'm speaking, I'm echoing through mine or I'm echoing through his?
I think through your own.
Oh, really?
I'm not hearing echo. I don't have any issue.
I don't hear echo.
I'm all good. The only concern that I have is that I don't see the recording icon other than on my.
I see.
Oh, yeah. Okay, great. I know that it's supposed to be recording, but okay. So if you see it, then that's fine. All right. So it looks like we have a pretty tight crew here. I think we're missing one contributor, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Faz notified me, said he wouldn't be able to join.
Oh, okay. So then let's put a message in Discord. Just I'm gonna drop an announcement there that we're getting going.
All right, let's give it like 30 seconds more and then we'll get started.
Okay, I made the announcement. So I was not able to get the weekly async update out before this meeting, but I can do so probably during the meeting.
Great. Great. All right. GM, welcome to, I think this is our third or fourth X Spaces Town Hall. We are at an interesting point with Pinto where the development work that we had originally slated for like our first year of development. For those that have been following closely, basically in March of 2025, many of the founding members or co-creators of Pinto all got together and charted out the next year. With something of this nature, it's quite difficult to see more than a year out in detail, in high fidelity, while we may have an indicator or a sense of where the low volatility money story will end up over a 10 or 20 year time horizon. We don't know exactly how to get there. And so historically, the development cycle has looked something like we put out, I guess if we start at the beginning, Publius, if you will, did their best to come up with what they could in theory while looking at the pre-existing projects for data. But then once Beanstalk was deployed, we got real-time data from the market, and the development since we've been out in the wild for the past 5 or so years has really been a call and response where we will design something and then put it out into the market. And then based on the data that is collected, we'll try to figure out where to go. And this happens both at the micro level with smaller changes like the maximum crop ratio, for example, or the excessively low L2SR, both of which have been changed over the course of the past year more than once. But then, and so that's an example of like shorter term reactions to data. But with respect to development, solidity development, particularly for systems where there's a lot of value at stake, requires more foresight and more commitment. And the reason I bring all of this up is we're really at the tail end of the development that we slated a year ago, where I think one of the, like, to have PI 14 go out, it's really an interesting phenomenon to be at a point where we really have limited work scoped out remaining for the project. And at the same time, as we've been talking about quite a bit in these town halls, there is a lot of opportunity ahead of us with respect to the next year of development and how we can best continue with this experiment. And there's some very clear avenues for exploration. But one thing that we really haven't spent the time to do yet, at least at this point in Pinto history, is to what I would like to use some of this time to do is to talk about what are the remaining changes or the remaining work that we expect to complete in the next month to 2 months, let's call it. And separately, I want to talk about some of the work that has happened this year and how it relates to where we're going next. So I think one of the discussions that has, because we've spent a lot of time recently talking about where this goes and what's next. But I want to take a little time to look around at what's transpired over the past year. So Frio has not been prepped for this, but I'm going to put you on the spot, Frio, and ask you to maybe kick off this discussion a bit by sharing what remains in the pipeline for these next couple months as we really, I think it's fair to say, as we close out this chapter of Pinto development, which again really started last March. So the floor is yours, sir.
What's up, guys? Yeah, I mean, the main two things we need to finish is the Beanstalk shipments, the mechanism in which we pay back Beanstalk holders to Pinto, and the fork system, which is a method in which, you know, uh, we can fork and create rule sets to communicate between other instances of a Beanstalk or Pinto, such that Beanstalk native assets can be migrated between these forks, uh, which is our solution to governance. Yeah, those are like the two things, I would feel that needs to be completed prior to, what you said, closing out. The Beanstalk shipments are needed because this is, a commitment to what we've said to the community we want to do. And the fork system is really a way, the standard or the foundation of what we want to do next. Without the fork system, it seems hard to really iterate or really severely limit our options, at least, uh, on what we can do with the model and the journey of creating new money. So uh, these are things that aren't explicitly related to the improvement of the model, I think, but they are necessary to create you know the new money. So those are the two things slated at the moment.
Thank you, sir. And yeah, just to add on to that, I think when we talk about a credit-based system, the credit is fundamentally a social phenomenon, and as much as we can use verifiable systems like Ethereum or Base to verify that the rules or the agreements around credit are honored, ultimately it's still a social phenomenon. And I believe that the best way for people to feel that the project, the low volatility money project as a whole, is credit worthy, is for us to, of course, as a community, fulfill our obligations that as part of the founding moment of Pinto, there was a commitment from the creators that Pinto as a protocol would honor the obligations of Beanstalk in a certain way. That in order for there to be continuity in the credit history of this experiment, that we actually implementing these shipments and putting it into code is an essential and meaningful step on our journey here. And I think this is, and you mentioned the fork system, which is our response to and solution for the governance problem that has obviously been quite a wrench in this whole vision and process. The fork system is the formal definition of the entire system here. Like if you zoom out and you think about like empty set dollar, right? Empty set dollar was cited in the Beanstalk white paper as the predecessor to Beanstalk. And empty set dollar had a ton of descendants, let's call it, or forks that forked the code base. At no time in Beanstalk's history was the idea presented that Beanstalk or the Beanstalk community should honor the credit of empty set dollar or dynamic set dollar or any of its dependents. But that is in juxtaposition to, in Pinto's case, we, and I am speaking on behalf of the creators at this point, when I say we felt that it was prudent to honor the Beanstalk debt because ultimately, in a sense, Pinto can be understood as a restructuring of Beanstalk debt, excuse me. While the replant was in some sense the first restructuring of the debt made from duress, having just been hacked. The Pinto fork, in many senses, is a continuation of Beanstalk. And anyone that was a creditor to Beanstalk at the time that Pinto was created is now a creditor of Pinto. And this continuity between the credit of Beanstalk and the credit of Pinto is, I believe, not just a really special thing, but it's a really important dynamic for us to better understand. And when I think about some of the friction in the early days of the Pinto community, I think a lot of it was around poor communication and generally a lack of communal understanding about the continuity and what it meant for Pinto to be a fork of Beanstalk, but a very different type of fork than like the DSD to ESD style fork where there's no continuity, or the ESD to Bean fork where there's no continuity. But to have a fork where there is a continuity of credit really is a new new thing. And as Frio mentioned, this is also a tangible, real solution to the governance problem, which is to say that how can you facilitate upgradability in the money, in the software that's running the currency, while eliminating the potential risk for something like what happened to Beanstalk back in 2022, where through governance, through on-chain governance, someone was able to go in and take all the money to abuse the governance system. So all of this is to say that the remaining work, to me, really is it is a bookend, and I'm really excited to see once we have this new governance structure in place, where and we've spent a lot of time talking about what's next, and I don't know if we'll have time to get into that in this particular meeting or town hall now, but it's great to just have a little bit of perspective on what we're about to finish, and the point that gets us to in our experiment. So the other topic, or the other half piece of the puzzle that I think is relevant here as we look around and take stock, take inventory before we try to chart out our course for the next year, let's call it, is I think it's good to have some perspective on what's actually been built this year so far. We still have the shipments and the fork system, but we've also done quite a bit. And Frio and I were talking this week, and Frio and I were questioning how good is the work that's gone on? How important is it? How likely is it to be useful? If you zoom out and think about it on a 20-year time horizon, how did we do this year? And as I look back, the meat of really what we've created is, we implemented this Snowball mechanism, first in the field, and then with respect to the more sophisticated convert system, we implemented a dynamic convert down penalty and a convert up system, which really completed layer 4 of the incentive mechanism. We've started to implement tractor and making automated farming, intent-based farming, really the centerpiece of how we're designing our user interface and how we expect people to interact with the protocol. And it also sort of the tractor system sets the groundwork in a way for the fork-based governance system that we're talking about. And I think it's very important in this experiment that we are hard on ourselves and analyze rigorously the work that we've done. And I think that there's a lot of positive that can be said about this work. But there's also a lot of work still to do and a lot left to be desired. I think the Snowball mechanism is potentially really powerful. If people recall, prior to the implementation of the soil Snowball, the activity in the field was such that even though we had some activity in the field and millions and millions, I think more than 10 million Pinto had been sown up until that point, the temperature was just going up only. And that ultimately posed an existential risk to the protocol, where one of the overhanging problems from Beanstalk was that the temperature would rise very quickly, and then it would also go down at the same pace. But during periods of time where we didn't have significant demand for soil, that the temperature would rise excessively so, where it wasn't efficient. And what we saw when we deployed the soil snowball is that it actually had tremendous efficacy, almost too much efficacy, one could argue, where the temperature started to come down immediately, and at the same time, the total amount of pinto sown went down drastically. I think the devil is in the details, and ultimately, due to the introduction of tractor in the field, there's a good argument to be made that there actually just isn't demand for soil in the current temperature range, and that this is where it's like maybe it's too good. The result is that the temperature really didn't increase until more recently, and so we had an extended period of time where the field wasn't super useful in reducing the supply, but I think it's like these are exactly the types of things that the mechanism theoretically at this point is pretty good, and we just have to parameterize it properly, which is in some ways more of an art than a science, particularly at this stage of the game. And so I look at the snowball mechanism, and it's like that is, I think there's a good argument to be made. It's the most sophisticated piece of the mechanism at this point. Maybe not technically to implement, but just from a game theory design perspective, it is. And I think it's been great to have that out in the wild and to see what it does. And generally, I think it's been a big success. So much so that we ended up implementing basically a sister system for converts. So I think the snowball, which the snowball doesn't really fit in our farming theme per se. So I think that's maybe something that we could have done better on. But it really is like a snowball effect. So it's a helpful name from a visualization perspective. But that was really the biggest change to the model. And then the second major change to the model was this dynamic convert system with a dynamic penalty and a dynamic bonus, where in theory this should facilitate the oscillation of the Pinto price across its value target. And through that, we've actually come to learn that, and I think this is really the beauty in the experimentation that is ongoing, which is to say that we had a hypothesis, and I think we can do a better job organizationally of like publishing our hypotheses and publishing how we intend to test our hypotheses. But from a very basic perspective, we held the hypothesis that the lack of sufficient stock incentive at the margin to convert was hampering people's conversions. And so we held the hypothesis that people weren't converting because they weren't incentivized to do so sufficiently by the stock system. But through the seed gauge and then ultimately the dynamic convert bonus and penalty, we have come to discover that a lot of people are either actively playing the game very, very, very inefficiently, or are just not playing the game at all. And that has pointed us to, I think, a bigger problem to tackle, which is that the distribution of yield within the system is not necessarily going to longer term oriented people. And so when we take stock on how we did this year, on the one hand, we really did design and implement an incredibly elegant and sophisticated convert bonus and penalty system, which I hope in the future will end up being useful. It probably will require some iteration and improvement, but I think it's directionally correct. But what we learned was that some of the other pieces of the puzzle, like how yield is distributed, are so poor that, at least in the current market conditions, it makes something like the dynamic convert bonus and penalty system unimportant, or not really useful in the current state of things. And so this has pointed us to bigger problems, like, as I've said, and as we've spoken a bit about, like how to most efficiently distribute the yield from the protocol with holders of the currency that are long-term oriented. I think if you look with a critical eye at what transpired with Pinto in its first few months, like, on the one hand, Pinto did significantly better than Beanstalk during Beanstalk's first couple months, where the total Pinto minted was less than Beanstalk minted, and this is even though more money came in, the protocol took it in and minted less, and ultimately that's like a good sign that the mechanism is better or more efficient. But then what played out is, even though the protocol was able to borrow like 11 million Pinto, almost 40% of the total supply that was minted, the fact that it was still unable to return the price of Pinto to its value target is an indicator that the system still grew too quickly during the initial growth cycle, and significantly so. It didn't just grow too quickly slightly, it grew too quickly by a lot. Or even though it was able to borrow 11 million Pinto from the market, now it might be up to like 13 million Pinto from the market or something. I don't remember exactly the latest figure. That the system is still significantly below the value target. That's data that other pieces of the puzzle are so weak right now that, even with the dynamic convert system and the soil snowball, that the system is just far from the value target and doesn't really have any reasonable expectation to get back to the value target anytime soon without new investment. That's an indicator that the way that the system is minting and distributing mints can be really heavily improved. So I think just like it's important for us to call balls and strikes as we experiment here. And it's like, on the one hand, the flood and the minting schedule was significantly better in how it played out than it did with Beanstalk. But due to, I think in general, people are much less interested in algo stables these days, and the market is generally in a very different condition. When you think about what does success look like for the model, what would it mean for the model to be like? I feel like done. Excuse me. I feel like done is the right framing. It's like the system should be able to, assuming no inflows or outflows, return itself to its value target. And like, if you really break things down, there is at the micro level like certain equilibria that would mean that the system can't return itself to the value target. Like in a practical way, right now we have a couple $100,000 of liquidity. In theory, if the system converted itself all the way back to the value target and no one left, then it could just be back at its value target with no change in liquidity. But in theory, people have an exit price at which they may leave. And it may be that, like, if the price gets to a certain threshold, people will sell, and they'll sell a certain volume such that the protocol effectively is constantly paying people out more than it can afford. So I guess I'm just trying to paint a picture of like there are certain states where even a perfect model wouldn't be able to return itself to the value target. But in a perfect world, in almost every case, the model can do that. And like it can do so by evaluating, when it should convert and how it should change the price and factor in how much effectively liquidity it's willing to pay people to leave below the value target so that everyone else can stay and value can remain at the value target. But what we've sort of learned is that even with a perfect model, if you over mint and if you over distribute the mints to people that are short-term oriented, you can really stack the deck against yourself. And the protocol can put itself in a very dangerous position, which is sort of the circumstances that the protocol has in practice been operating under for the past 9 months or so, let's call it a year or so. So I all of this is to say, on the one hand, the work that has happened this year I think will be long-term valuable. The Snowball system has demonstrated short-term value, and I think it's here to stay in general, or a version of it will be here to stay in general. I feel similarly about the convert bonus and penalty system, the dynamic convert bonus and penalty system. But what we've really learned is that there are bigger fish here that need to be fried. And as we think about next year and what this development should look like, on the one hand, I see potentially facilitating utility, which is a conversation that we've talked a lot about, but also about really aligning the issuance of the new mints to holders, and to do so in a way where maybe people get access to the yield but have to hold for a certain period of time. Maybe the way the stock system works and handles distributions needs to be modified to further align the people that earn the yield with long-term incentive alignment with the protocol. So this, I know I've been talking for quite a while. This is sort of what I had prepared for the crew, and happy to talk about any of this. Happy to talk about where things go now. Happy to talk about some more details about what's happened this year. Yeah, that's what I got. So the floor is open.
I know Asabinya had a question that he put in the general channel a couple weeks ago. If you would like to ask that on your own behalf, sir, I would give you that opportunity. Otherwise, I'm happy to do so on your behalf. Well, the question that he had asked in chat was, will integration with external protocols like Nebula affect how the model behaves? Could this be considered another parameter that can be tuned by Pinto?
Well, yes is the short answer. ultimately it depends on the structure of the integration, and it depends on what. I mean, the details are really what matters. Which is to say that, let's say that we figure out a method for credit, such that there's this problem that we've been talking about for a long, long time here, which is how can you leverage the power of the credit of the protocol to facilitate real economic activity by having people effectively borrow Pinto directly from the protocol while preventing effectively an arbitrage where people borrow for a very low rate from the protocol and and then deposit that back into the silo and just basically dilute all of the people that are holding risk in the protocol and of the Pinto price. Those
I think we lost Ben. Did other people also lose him?
Yeah, I lost them.
Yeah.
No, Ben, we can't hear you. Welcome back. Welcome back.
I'm sorry about that. My Wi-Fi said it was good. I think it was an issue with X, but hard to tell. But the what I was saying is that in such an instance where, like, when I think about what an integration might look like facilitating a system for lending will require some sort of internal parameters. For example, how much to lend out in aggregate, how much to lend out to any individual, in theory, in order to make it such that there's no like centralized point of control with respect to the ability to issue loans or substantiate loans. We would probably need to implement some system through which people can be delegated or authorized as an authorized lender on behalf of the protocol, and we would need to parameterize how that works and who can participate and how much each participant can lend out and what qualifications they need to meet. And that could potentially be case by case, where each lender has a different mandate and different permissions. So, like, when I think about utility and an integration with like a lending system, for example, to me, it's there's lots of parameters, I guess, is the short answer. So, if another shade of an integration would be like Pinto perps, which is something that we've talked a lot about, where someone could just use S Pinto, for example, as a settlement asset for some perp futures, such that as the open interest for the futures grows, that will lead to more long-term demand for Pinto that can generate sustainable yield for the holders, including the perp holders, such that the yield from Pinto subsidizes the funding rates on both sides of the perp, which is another potential source of utility that we've talked about for Pinto. That's an example of something that you really can't prevent or put a cap on it as a protocol, just due to the open source and permissionless nature of such a system, where it's like you're not really able to. I mean, you could put into the S Pinto contract some sort of limitation or restriction on the total supply of S Pinto, but someone could also just fork that and create, Y Pinto or S Pinto 2 that has no cap and use that. So certain integrations like a potential credit system that could facilitate an actual economy, those are things that you can create the software to facilitate, but you really can't you can't automate. You can automate the execution of the system, but you can't escape from the need to parameterize the system, which is really an interesting truth to come to. That in theory we could design an algorithm that is supposed to determine these limits, but fundamentally this is a social lending and who to lend to and what businesses to lend for. These are things that I think it's hard to delegate entirely to an automated algorithm. And so you do end up coming back to a system that is governed socially. And it's not just a question of participation, it's a question of structure and incentive alignment where you really do need a strong sense of governance. And this is where I keep coming back to the fork system as really important, because it's like at the end of the day, I don't want to be in charge or a part of a multi-sig that can just on a whim with no authority change who can lend money and for what interest rate and for what business. That's just another iteration of the same fiat system that we have today. And so in practice, the only way to really fulfill this vision is to come up with a coherent answer to create a new money, a new currency that can sustain and support and underlie a new economy, a better economy for the people, particularly for our generation and beyond. That is something that can only be done with a system for social consensus underneath it. And this is a very profound realization or conclusion that I can't say I'm happy about. I think if I had it my way, this would not be the case, right? Wouldn't it be simpler if we could just automate everything? But in practice, it's not so. That to really facilitate an economy, you do need people to socially coordinate, and it's hard to foresee a world, at least in the short term, where we're going to be able to get away from organizing ourselves via voting effectively and voting with your money in this case. Which system of lending rules do you subscribe to? So, not to get ahead of ourselves, because it's very still unclear to me how this is all supposed to work, but what I foresee is a meta-level system of governance that is part of the fork system, but is not defined within the fork system, because again, the social participation is the thing that matters here. And there's not really, if you study social consensus, there's not really anything that you can do to avoid that. So really what I foresee happening is a meta level system rule set around ethical forking and unforking, and we'll need a word for taking two forks and merging them back together to be once again part of, maybe merging is the right word, I don't know, but a meta level opt-in system where we as a low volatility money community have rules that they can be written within our community, but they're unwritten from a blockchain perspective because they exist at a higher level, which is to say that when you have a different perspective about, what is the right way to lend value, for example, we need a meta level system for people to opt in and out of sets of these rules, and to do so in a way that doesn't destroy the network effect of money, which is a really interesting trade-off space of, on the one hand, you want specification and you want customization, and you want people to have sovereignty over the rules that govern their money. But at the same time, you can't really have that without having this meta level system of governance. So that's one of the bigger ideas I've been trying to figure out how to articulate. I don't think that it's perfectly clear at this moment, or that I was as articulate as I would like to be. But the question about like, will these integrations require parameterizations? And then it's like, well, that parameterizing things really requires governance. Perhaps the story is a bit more clear here about like what's happening right now. Why are we working on a fork system? What is this governance related conversation? How does this play into the work that hopefully we're going to do on the economic side of things this year? This is where we're coming from. All right, well, the floor is open. We've only got 9 minutes or so here left slotted. So if there are other questions or comments, happy to talk more about any of this. Or if there's no other questions, I know I've thrown a lot on the table today, we can break. But insofar as there's other stuff people want to dive deeper into, we've got some more time as well. All right. Well, thank you everyone for attending. Hopefully this was interesting. I'm looking forward to chatting again soon. I expect this time next week. All right. Take care, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Talk soon.
Thanks, guys.